Welcome to Movies That Matter, the podcast going beyond basic film criticism to boldly explore a social issue affecting people's lives. I'm Nicole, and with me today is
Lexy
and Garret.
Garret, what movie are we overanalyzing this week?
We are overanalyzing Wicked.
We're holding space for this podcast recording.
We're doing Wicked. Wicked is the untold story of the Witches of Oz. Stars Emmy, Grammy, and Tony-winning Oscar-nominated powerhouse Cynthia Erivo as Elphaba, a young woman misunderstood because of her green skin who has yet to discover her true power, and Grammy-winning multi-platinum recording artist Ariana Grande as Glinda, a popular young woman gilded by privilege who has yet to discover her true heart.
Can we get a couple of points out of the way before we dive into our thoughts about this movie? I'll say up front, I have neither seen the stage musical, and I picked up and put down that book 5 different times and couldn't get past 2 chapters. So I came in knowing absolutely nothing. Lexy?
So I did see the musical when it came to San Francisco. I don't know what year it was, but probably fairly, soon after the original Broadway run, when it was kind of in that popular phase when it first came out on Broadway. And I did really like it. I'm not a normal musical theater person. I like the ones that are usually more popular, but I'm not heavily involved in that community. But I did really like Wicked.
She's trying to assure everybody, don't worry, she wasn't a theater kid in high school. She was way cooler.
She don't
want to be tarred with that brush.
That's not
a theater kid, guys.
I'm trying to set expectations that I don't have all the knowledge in the world about musical theater. But I did really love the original, and it's fun. It's kind of funny because I hadn't thought about it in so long, kind of after that initial phase, and then seeing this and kind of reading about it again reignited a lot of memories that I had forgotten about. And I'll say that.
I will say I've actually never seen the stage play as well, which I know shocks a lot of people.
I'm actually a little surprised, yeah.
I just have not ever been a Wicked bandwagon person. I've spent a lot of time in the theater, and I was not a theater kid, but Wicked's just never one that really drew me. I know it's fantastic and amazing, and I'll probably go see the stage play now based on how much I actually enjoyed the movie. So I kind of went into it blind as well, but I went with somebody who had seen the stage play several times and read the book several times. So they were my go-to guy to know where the barometer was.
Yeah. So my sister, I'm somewhat of a theater kid. Musicals are not my favorite genre. My sister was a huge musical person. She saw Wicked and was like, nah, the songs were not that good. I think it's overrated. And so I never ended up seeing it. So going in completely fresh, despite the movie being off to quite a rocky start, I loved it. I just loved it.
I thought it was really well done. And from a movie technical perspective, I thought it was shot beautifully. I was like, oh my gosh, very rarely do I have no notes about how a movie is shot, but I was like, everything worked for them. The cut scenes were not too bad. The cinematography, the way that they captured fisheye lens to an overarching, broad pan lens, all of a sudden I was really impressed. No notes on the cinematography. I thought it was beautifully shot. I did think it was a little slow in the beginning. I was like, okay, but I do love a musical that kind of can have a song intertwined with actual dialogue and everything. It doesn't have to be just a musical number set, done, finish. So I thought that was really well done in the movie here. Lexi?
Yeah, I'm surprised to hear that I'm the one with most the most expectation going in or original knowledge about this movie. But I loved it. I saw it for the first time over Thanksgiving, and I actually did see it again uh Thursday in Georgetown, and I did the sing-along version, so that was fun. Although I was a little surprised, like, no one was singing in my theater, it was
Oh
just
no!
me. I'm like, I don't know if it was because I saw it at 11:30 or whatever, but I was like, "Why is no one singing?" Like,
I mean,
but
there is not a world in which we live where I could sing along with Defying Gravity.
well, and it's funny because I sang along for most all the songs because by that point, because yeah, after I saw it the first time, I have like the new soundtrack on repeat, and I've been listening to again. And as I kind of alluded to earlier, like it's reignited a lot of the memories and the love that I did have for the original version. And I really like. I mean, I don't like every song, but like Popular, What Is This Feeling, Defying Gravity, like kind of the big ones, like I did really love. And I was like, oh, I remember all these words now. And then also now listening to like the new version, I am learning all these words again, and even some of the songs I didn't remember as much from before. Um, but yeah, I couldn't sing to Defying Gravity. One, because I'm not going to try and hit a note I can't hit, but also I was like crying through Defying Gravity. Both times I cried at the same points where I cried. I cried during their Ozdust ballroom dance with Glinda and
Mm.
Elphaba when they finally joined together, and then I also cried during almost all of Defying Gravity. But besides that, yeah, I loved it. It's a 2 hour and 40 minute runtime. Did not notice it at all. Um, and I think the biggest surprise for me was Ariana Grande and how I mean, I don't listen to a ton of her music, but I listened to, some of her hits, and I figured, she could sing, but through, the press tour and all the different interviews, like I've, since learned that she's like a really big fan of Wicked and really wanted to be Glinda and did a bunch of prep to really land the role and went through like the full audition process, and she blew it out of the park in really encompassing that role and all of the comedic timing. So that was a great surprise for me. It's funny because she's kind of had this weird history of like kind of darkening her skin and masking in certain ways with different ethnicities, but in terms of this specific project, she like blew it out of the park and I was really impressed. And then I agree with a lot of the practical sets and the camera shots and all of that. So I'll leave that at that for now.
Yeah, I'll pick up. So there's so many things to talk about. So let's start with Ariana Grande, which for me was the biggest worry going into this movie. It was like Cynthia Erivo, I knew. I mean, there's no way she wasn't going to knock it out of the park, right? Like I was like Ariana Grande was kind of an unknown. Pop stars and musicals has not always worked. So I was like, this is really going to hinge on how good Ariana Grande is. And I will say like 3 points. One, just full stop, she was good. Two, there are a lot of duets in this movie. Their voices blended really nicely. Because I've heard people sing a duet and you're like, okay, both of them are good singers, but like their voices don't go together well. You know what I mean? Like that's kind of critical for this movie, and that worked. Number three, I thought their chemistry was off the charts. I read a review that said like, wow, they had way more chemistry with each other than any of them. Either of them did with supposedly like this male lead. I was like, well, yeah, he was just kind of standing around taking up space. Not that he did a bad job, but like their chemistry was so good. It was just like impossible to believe they're not friends in real life. That's how good it was for me.
Yeah, I mean, I'm an Ariana Grande fan, so I've seen her perform and seen her do a lot of stuff over time. But like to me, this was a different version of Ariana Grande. Like it was some of her personality thrown in there, sure. Some of her, what was that show she used to be on as a teenager?
Oh, Victorious and Cat and
No,
Sam.
yeah, Cat and Sam. It was kind of that kind of kooky, like little like one-liner thing she used to do on Cat and Sam, but like she really embodied what I felt like Glinda was, and took that to everything she did, every interaction, every time she spoke, every time she literally gave what I felt like was one of the best acting performances I'd seen in a really long time. But it was undeniable that these two were friends in real life. I mean, some of those conversations felt so authentically real that they probably have had them outside of this movie. And that they, you can tell from the press tour and everything that they really, really have enjoyed each other's company. But she just crushed it. I mean, she landed it. And we know she can sing, but she was able to take a Broadway style of singing, which I wasn't necessarily sure she was going to have because she is a pop singer and she's got a very specific style. But she landed that with ease and grace. And just throughout the whole movie, I was like, I kept forgetting she's a pop star. Like, I would have sworn she was a Broadway star at that point, because she just had the timing down that you don't see really from a lot of pop stars who act in movies, musicals. They're just like, okay, so you're just doing you in whatever. But she wasn't. I felt like she actually like gave it more of Glenda than Ariana, which was really nice. But yeah, I agree that they blew it away every time they sang together, and was just so impressed by like the eyebrow expressions that they were giving, like the minor kind of like acting that you can't teach, that is like, it's felt. And I thought it was really nice to see a movie that didn't necessarily, everyone was going to love it, but I think more people had a message that they took away from this than they realized they were going to. But I think most people were super surprised at like how charismatic and chemistry filled both of these two women were.
There was such a generosity to Ariana's performance as well. You know what I mean? Like, Cynthia Erivo is the star, right? She is the good guy. Glinda's kind of hovering between being the villain for most of the movie. And there was such both part of the actresses, when it was Ariana Grande's time to shine, Erivo left her the floor to do it. Like, I felt that there was such a give and take to those performances where neither was just trying to hog the limelight when it was not their turn to have it. So much of the musical theater world is surprisingly male dominated. When it's like there's 40 women to every like one male actor auditioning for a part, right? And to see a musical that was so utterly focused on the just two women at the lead, and to see them play off of each other and enjoy each other in this way was such a wonderful experience. It
Yeah, I
just like
totally.
didn't need a man. It just didn't need to be a man.
Yeah, I totally agree with both of you in that. I think what we're saying has been confirmed in a lot of the interviews where I've heard Cynthia Erivo talking about how they really both tried to kind of match well so that the harmonies did work really well in the movie. They also both did live singing, which I don't know the full technicality of it, but it sounds like it adds some sort of effect to it that was positive for this movie. And then to the point about Ariana specifically, one reviewer I was listening to said you kind of like, she's such a huge pop star. Like, we all know who she is in her own right, but then you kind of, yeah, you forget who that she, or like kind of as also Garret said, like you forget that she is who she is, and you really just see her as Glinda. And despite having seen Cynthia Erivo in less stuff, even though I've seen her in a couple things before, I honestly would maybe argue for myself that they both fell into the role, but also that I still technically may have remembered Cynthia Erivo as a standalone person more than I did Ariana, because she did such a good job and really encompassed that role. And even the moments of like her like physical comedy of the hair wave and her like sliding on the floor during Popular, like waving her arms and sliding on the floor, and they were popular. You're right. It's all that like the extra emphasis that she was putting was just like all like 10 out of 10.
Yeah,
Yeah.
oh, go ahead, Garret.
Nope, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, like, I don't want to do a whole podcast on Ariana Grande. Like, it was just a surprise and I wasn't expecting it. But obviously, like, Cynthia Erivo was amazing. Her voice is stunning, just stunning. And I thought, it's a trope. It's a really kind of trite role to have to play the like outsider nerdy girl that nobody likes at school. And I thought she really added an edge to it that I appreciated. There's so much of like, I actually don't care what any of you think about me. I am content to be unpopular and just be fine and do what you're gonna do. And I agree with you. Like, I was just crying at the end, like full on crying. And I was like, her like triumphant song and moment, like she just embodied it. And you're just like, your whole heart was just like rooting for her.
Yeah, I think what I enjoyed most about Cynthia's performance is that she did make it her own. She didn't necessarily follow the prescripted Broadway women that had come before her, which is, I think, was probably the most important part about this. Is like, I didn't want to see a Broadway play in a movie. I didn't want to just see something that everyone else had seen before. But I mean, even the way she sang Defying Gravity in her own way, and I think she did own more of the, well, I'm going to call it badassery of Elphaba, and was like, I don't care what you think. I am here. I'm green. Who cares? But just really took a charismatic approach to Elphaba that I don't know that I've seen more of kind of that like shy demeanor approach. That's like, well, I guess I'm green, but it's okay. But she was just like, and what? Step two if you don't like it. And I really thought she blew me away. And the last scene in Defying Gravity, it's a long song, but it's like you start to hear the tingle of the keys, and you're like, oh god, there's the goosebumps. There they are. But just the transformation for her in that song, realizing like, you know what? Everything I've ever been told is a lie. Everyone's always said that I'm the one who's wrong. And it turns out I'm the only one who's trying to do something right now. And on the line, I'm the one you want. It's me, it's me, it's me. It's always like, I've seen that done 1,000 times, but she just like took such ownership of it, not necessarily just singing it. She took so much ownership in that time that her performance will stand out as, I think, one of the best performances to go down in musical history. Because I think she just took on the role of Elphaba in a way that she embodied it and made her own. And the iconic stylings of her, like, I mean, she is lovely, but like how they styled her throughout this whole movie really also showed me that they wanted to make this something that was about her and her identity and her lifestyle versus playing a part in a role. And I think that was like all encompassing. My favorite part was just how she got to be herself to play this role versus where I think Ariana kind of stepped into a role and let go of herself. I was excited that Cynthia got to bring herself to the role and express it for the first time in a way that I'm not sure she has before.
Yeah. So I'm going to say this now. I'm probably going to have to say it again because the Oscars are real snobby about what genres they like to give out awards for. But the man, the myth, the legend, there's absolutely no one who could have done this movie but Jon Chu. It was a complete triumph for him as a director. And as somebody who grew up watching and loving all, the sort of golden age in the 50s and 60s of movie musicals, I want to get into everything you just said about the styling, about the sets, about everything. But I'm like, first and foremost, like, again, he cast Ariana Grande. That was a brilliant choice. And he's made other, like, kind of really smart casting choices with people who were unexpected in roles, and I thought was terrific. Of course, he put Michelle Yeoh back in. No problems there. She cannot sing, do not care. The Jeff Goldblum thing I thought was neat, the behind the curtain so he could have a dance scene. But, I mean, the thing that he's known for and the thing that he carried off to the best possible effect in this movie was filming dance scenes, right? Those dance scenes were amazing. They were just so good, and they were so well shot, and just move, like a movie musical is a movie, right? So you have to move the camera through the dancers, which I don't always like, because sometimes I'm like, no, just stand there and like let them dance so I can see it. And he knew when to do that, and then he knew when to like do a tracking shot or a quick cut to other dancers doing other things. Like I could just sit there and watch Loathing over and over and over and over and over again. That for me was my favorite number, even though the one in the library was like the bigger number. I loved Loathing. I thought it was great. I thought the choreography was terrific. I had so much joy and delight watching those dance scenes, and I was so thrilled to be able to watch several big splashy dance numbers in a modern movie.
Definitely. Going back to the earlier point about Cynthia Erivo, I know I meant to look up like why there was this choice, but I know that she helped with the choice of like for her wig to have like the micro braids and like
Oh God, iconic.
so like that was a big choice that I think she was a part of, that I think also really added to like her look, and kind of, she had a braid, but then she also had different hairstyles with the micro braids. And then I know she had like a dedicated nail person that I think she always, I mean, it was, I was trying to look for it the second time I saw it, but she always had like long nails that were done a certain way. And then there were a couple of points where I saw that she had kind of specific nail designs on her nails besides just like kind of some shades of green. So I don't know if that was more for like the press tour or for in the actual movie, but I know that the nails were also a big part of, I think, how she was wanting to tell the story of Elphaba. And then
For
with
both of
John,
them.
for about Ariana too.
Yeah, Glinda's nails were like always like French manicure, the subtle
Oh
pink,
yeah.
like, and we're also long, but not quite as long. Like I felt like the nails did a lot of acting in some of those scenes. Like it was very purposeful.
Yeah. And then for it's interesting because the one main criticism I've seen of this movie is about color saturation.
Yeah, I saw
And
that too.
and when I think of like, yeah, Jon Chu's work, like at least I'm thinking of like Crazy Rich Asians. I'm thinking of In the Heights. I mean, I know he's done other stuff, but those are like the two that I've seen. And both of those are very colorful movies with, different shades and things like that. And then this one, I think one of the main complaints I saw was that I think it's especially the scenes at Shiz University with, I think, usually Ariana, that are more, yeah, like muted. There are still colors, but like they're definitely more muted and maybe not as much contrast, especially like on her face. Like her face does kind of look washed out at certain points, but watching it again after seeing that criticism, um, I was thinking, oh, it really does seem for some reason on these specific parts of the movie. Like I didn't notice it as much in Munchkinland. I didn't notice it as much in the Emerald City. Like it really seemed more on specific points as at Shiz University. And I know he did say that they didn't want to go like full too much to make it seem like unrealistic, quote unquote. But I think certain places a little more contrast, like especially on her face, would have been maybe nice.
Yeah, I thought that the decision to kind of incorporate these small things, like, I mean, her hair is no small thing, but the nails, her hair, the lighting, the casting, I thought it was all really well done because it was like these added details that it literally only added. There was nothing I felt like the acting was there, you know, the singing was there, but these added. And I think it's very rare that we see something that just gives additional gratitude and support versus like a lot of times like, well, it was, you added it, but it didn't really do much for me. Um, the micro braids, I literally, when I saw she had micro braids and then she styled the micro braids into other hairstyles, I was like, this is iconic because it's like, the whole undertone is she's green, right? And we all know what that means, right? Like she's black. Like you're black. What's going on? You're different than everybody. And it's like, but this also took a nice liberty too, because this is the first time we've seen a very, very diverse cast. The original was pretty much everyone was white because that was kind of like a lot of the issue in the beginning of the musical. And as time's gone on, the cast has become more diverse. But this movie was so full of diverse people that like her being green was so different from everybody else. Like, you know, there were people who could have also probably had micro braids. There were people who could have had same hairstyles, people who wore glasses, people who, you know, but like it was just about her being green. And so I thought that did a really nice job of removing kind of race from it to be like, look, this is the underlying tone that we know we're all talking about right now. But I'm really going to make it about her being so green, it hurts. Like, and I wanted to just like, as we talk about social issues, and it was so nicely woven in that she got to like, you know, everyone was all up in arms, like, oh well, that's not Elphaba's hairstyle, and that's not what she would have looked like, and blah blah blah, and her clothes would have been like, yeah, because you were there in Oz when this was going down, clearly, and you know. But this movie showed so much diversity in itself that they like got to silence all those people who were like, look, there are people who in Oz, there are talking animals, there are people of all different races, there are people, but she's green.
Yeah.
And that's what you're gonna have to pick apart.
Yeah.
So I just thought her style, the way she, I don't know if you noticed, her shoulder pads grew throughout the movie. So like she started with a soft shoulder pad, then a harder shoulder pad, and like they like her costumes literally make her into what she will become, the Wicked Witch of the West. But I just thought it was like iconic the way that everybody kind of developed. Glinda developed more frills throughout the, so she started in more of like a plain kind of like, you know, pink everything, but like as she gets into more Glinda, all of her costumes start to have more lace, more frills, and so she also starts to become Galinda. Actually, that was so funny. But yeah, I really enjoyed it. I thought it was absolutely wonderful, and I think Jon Chu knew exactly what he was doing, and he really just captured some wonderful scenes that I don't think anyone else could have captured because his eye for dramatic pause, color, and effect at the same time is uncanny.
Agreed. So yeah, a couple things on. So I read the same complaint about the saturation. I totally disagree with it. I mean, obviously it was a deliberate choice, and you can say you liked or did not like the choice. I liked the choice. I agree that if he had shot it fully saturated, it would have been too reminiscent of the original. Like I just think that would have been a mistake. I don't think you could have done a Technicolor of this. And like little known fact, again, I don't know how it was in the Gregory Maguire book. I loved The Wonderful Wizard of Oz as a kid. I read all of the books. There's a whole series of them. Emerald City is not green in the books. Emerald City is white, and then you get a pair of green glasses to put on before you walk into Emerald City, and that's what makes it green. And so I thought, again, this was like another choice in terms of how to give you that look and feel of this is not the Oz of Judy Garland. This is not the stage set Oz. This is not the Oz from the book. Like this is this other Oz, right? And I thought it was perfect. I absolutely loved the color that was in the film. I loved all of the costumes. If someone could just ship me Madame Morrible's entire outfit, I would like to wear that for the rest of my life. Thank you. I love a puff sleeve, and I sure as heck love a high neck. Like, and on Michelle Yeoh, you're like, that woman is just so freaking stunning. It's not fair. I also noticed one of the things about the costumes that I really appreciated was the school uniforms had skirts and they had pants, and both genders wore both uniforms, which I thought was so cool. It was such a small detail, and I was like, but yet a very impactful, important one, that just because you were a woman didn't mean you had to wear the skirt version of the school uniform. And apparently you got to pick your own colors if you're a Glinda, which was also funny and great.
Yeah, the costumes were amazing. And I hope it's, you know, when Oscar time comes around, I hope that it's one of the ways that this movie gets recognized.
I mean, I just want Jon Chu to be nominated. I'm worried he won't be. It's not easy. It's not an easy thing to do. And it's also not a time period where everybody is doing it either, right? So I just feel like filming a movie musical like this, like it's such a callback to earlier days. I don't know. I was like, what a triumph. Like what an absolute pleasure to just be in this world with the costumes. The sets were great. And I think my main complaint was the opening number. It had two problems. Number one, it was all CGI and that looked clunky and terrible. And thankfully was not an issue in the rest of the movie because they built real sets. And they, added CGI around it, but like that first one was yuck. And then number two, I was like, that song stunk.
Oh, I like that one.
And not only was the song not very good, you're like, categorically Ding Dong the Witch is Dead is a better song. And you're just sort of like begging reference back to the original and you're like, nah, this is not hitting the same way Ding Dong the Witch is hitting. So I didn't like it. And I do think like, honestly, any of the weaknesses in the film were weaknesses of the source material. But again, didn't detract from my overall enjoyment of it, but I'm like, yeah, that was not a good song, and those clunky CGI sets just didn't work for me.
Yeah, I guess because I'm not sure what the answer to this is, but I know that they planted, it's kind of crazy. They planted apparently 9 million tulips for this movie and part of the set building experience. So I guess because of that, I assumed that the rest of Munchkinland was also a set piece in that original number, but
the houses just looked fake. They looked really CGI to me.
Interesting. I'll also look more into that.
But then everything past that was great.
I also thought Peter Dinklage was a good voice acting job for it's Dr. Dunlap. I'm forgetting the name. Or Dun something.
Yeah, talk about representation. You had a character in a wheelchair, and then you had Peter Dinklage in there as well. I was like, they really got all the fronts on this one.
Yeah, well, and yeah, Peter Dinklage I think I did know it was him, but then also his voice at certain points I would not immediately think of him, and then other times I did see I could very clearly hear his voice. But I thought he did a great job with his acting, and yeah, I like the actress who played Nessa Rose, who's also a real life wheelchair user, and so is the younger actress who plays young Nessa Rose, is also a real life wheelchair user. And one fact that I learned recently that I did not know is apparently this portrayal of Nessa Rose is the first time that someone has actually been a wheelchair user to play the role, which is kind of crazy that the Broadway show went so long not casting someone who's a wheelchair user.
The casting was great. Jeff Goldblum was a funny, wonderful choice for the Wizard of Oz. I love everything about it being Jeff Goldblum.
But it was just Jeff Goldblum being Jeff Goldblum, which I think was even funnier. Like well, I'm just me over here, just doing me and acting in this part. I'm reading lines, but I'm not really acting. Like, I thought he did a great job, and I agree that I thought Peter Dinklage did a wonderful voice acting job. Like, he acts so well in so many things and gives wise advice, but it's often like with a hint of humor. And I thought this was just a really nice him being a voice of reason without having to be humorful. So I thought it was really nice to see him as like a very serious character in this movie.
What did you guys think of like the Kristen Chenoweth?
Oh, me and like half my theater were just clapping when they came on screen. We're like, like absolutely like super into it.
Nice. Okay, good. Yeah, I think that was I really liked it. I think I kind of figured they'd be in a cameo in some way, but it was nice that they were not on for too long, but on for a decent number of time, and then also to have the different points of Kristen Chenoweth being with Ariana and then Idina Menzel being with Cynthia Erivo and having the two of them together. That was really nice. And it's nice to hear them sing again since they're, still have great singing voices. So I really enjoyed that.
Yeah, I thought it was a nice like callback to like pay homage to the people who like really made this the iconic, um, I guess, popular cult it is. But it was like super nice to do in a way that was fun and loving and still showcase them and be like, I love it when she was like, sing, sing. And Ariana starts to sing. She's like, no, my song. Like, you don't get to sing right now. Like, you've had your time. You'll get more. Um, it just, overall, I got goosebumps throughout this movie like 4 to 5 times. And I not really had any expectations. I just thought it was done so well on so many levels that people who didn't even like it, people who don't enjoy Wicked, people who went and saw it with their families over the holidays, stuff like that, really are coming out and being like, wow, that was quite lovely. And I'm glad we did it.
Yeah. Social issues stuff. There's a lot going on in this movie. Possibly too much.
No, yeah, I was just gonna say like pick one. Like uh it's it's so much. I mean, it's meant to be, right? It's meant to be a social spark play. The book was meant to like stir up a lot of like class issues, and it was also race issues. It was then oppression issues and almost dictator-like shit, but then silencing of voices and order and control. And just pick one, and we'll talk about it. But like, if you walked away from this movie not getting anything out of it socially charged or socially impactful, I'm sorry to say there's probably no hope for you in the rest of the world, because like you could you could not have gone and seen this movie and not picked up on one thing, no matter how subtle. Inclusion versus exclusion, like, the in group versus the out group. Like, you boil it down to literally as easy as we need to, but, popular versus unpopular, nerds versus, beauty. Like, there was so much to be said about this movie that, like, it was done so well in a digestible way. And I think that's what I really took away from it. It didn't belabor one point too long. And it left a lot of things to be kind of talked about in a healthy manner, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I think, yeah, as we said, there's disability, there's race, there's, queer elements, there's, yeah, all of what Garrett said. And then I heard one person on TikTok say that, the people who this might need to reach the most will probably go over their heads. Unfortunately, it sort of depends on how it hits the person who is listening to it. And I think that, yeah, every kind of movement has their own uniqueness in terms of like what affects them and what, specific points they might be trying to fight against, whether it's either specific stereotypes or specific ways that different groups are treated. But I think this movie does, yeah, a nice job of hitting kind of the commonalities of different groups and how they feel like an outsider, and the common ways that people experience the similarities between different groups and how they experience like different disenfranchisement. And, from the things of like with the animals in this film of, erasing the history and what is real history and oh, can we, as when Glinda says in the movie, like, just, let's not belabor the past, just teach us history. Like, what are we counting as history? And them hiding kind of the relevance that the animals have had in this world in the past and erasing them, and how it can parallel with, book banning and what we're teaching people in the classroom and, all of these different subjects. But then you can also, I know there's been discussions about, Adina Menzel, who's the original Alphaba, being Jewish, and how this relates to Judaism and the, uh, erasure of that group and, all that comes with it. And so, yeah, there's a lot to go into it, and there's so many things you can pick out of it, but also it is very seamless, which is a feat.
Yeah, I watched this interesting video essay by a YouTuber named FD Signifier, And he brought up the point that, like, so this kind of commentary, this kind of wokeness, this social commentary only works when the people it's intended for miss the point. Because he says, and his example, if this resonates with either of you, is The Boys, which I haven't seen. But then he's like, the more overt the message got in The Boys, the more the quality declined. So it's like, if you make something overt, it's like almost necessarily going to be bad because it just becomes too messagey. And so in order for it to be good, it has to be more subtle, which means the people who it's intended for are never going to get it. I was
That's
like, that's a really interesting point. I need a lot more time to digest it.
I will agree with The Boys. Like, it is the parallels between The Boys in the most recent season and our like current, especially the like Trump comparisons and like all that stuff. It is very overt at this point. And the show still is good, but it is not as good as the first couple seasons. So I do agree. And that's an interesting point that I had not thought about, but hearing it laid out, I do totally agree.
Yeah, and I'm curious to see where we go in part two because I think the crux of this movie really rests on kind of Glinda's journey, right? For Elphaba, as someone who has been an outcast and been oppressed in her own way, it's easy for her to relate to the animal's plight, right? It's an easy alliance for her. The empathy comes naturally. And yes, she's sort of given her heart's desire, which she then has to turn down in favor. But she, for almost all the movie, has had almost nothing to lose. And the question is, how do you get a Glinda who has everything to lose, who has always been in a position of privilege, to start to empathize with the oppressed and to work towards on their behalf, right? I mean, that's sort of the question of the ages that we've all asked ourselves in social movements. Like, how do you convince the people who have the privilege to turn it down?
When I think a lot of one jokes I've seen on TikTok and things like that is like Glinda is like classic white woman. And you know, white women can either continue in the same way or they, maybe can try and deconstruct certain things and be helpful, but it's, it can go either way. And we'll see with Glinda in this show.
Well, and I mean, things we do know is like her sister, Elphaba's sister, becomes the other witch, right? And so you have to think about where the decline happens there for her to have been pushed also to a breaking point to where she's now looked at as the Wicked Witch of the East. And so starting to realize that, I think one of the things I took away most was like, pity is not a substitute for interaction. Like, I would rather you not interact with me if you're only going to pity me. And as the movie kind of progressed, like, and Glinda started to have awareness of what was happening to the animals, it still was all about her. It still was like, oh, I'm going to change my name. This will be an important thing. I shall hereforth be known as Glinda because I'm in solidarity with the animals. But she only did it to get something she wanted, which I thought was a really nice allegory for white women only do things for themselves, thinking it's going to help them, but often you're, cutting off your nose to spite your face. So
Or it's merely virtue signaling.
Yeah.
It has no real impact, right? You're just trying to show that you're one of the good ones.
Yeah, even her, like, we can argue that, she actually did love Elphaba, but her main motivation in wanting to be with Elphaba is to help learn magic. And
she has to get something first.
Yeah, she's willing to like sacrifice her status quo as long as she's getting something out of it. She didn't just want to be her friend. She only wanted something from her. And so it's like this idea that, like, even if we're virtue signaling, oh, everybody look at me, look over here, I'm doing a wonderful thing for people. I'm going to, the popular, I always have a interesting time with, because you will be popular. I'll make you just like me. I'll change everything about you to be just like me, and then you'll be popular, and then you'll see that you are worthy as a woman. People will pay attention to you because of your feminine beauty and wiles. And I'm like, I love that it misses the point, because it's the whole idea, right? Like, Linda doesn't actually know what popularity is. She knows what beauty is. She knows what she's not liked for anything other than like her status. And once she's stripped of all of that, she sees in Oz that like people really don't like, oh, we don't actually like you. You have no magic ability. We don't really need you. Who cares if you're pretty? Like, we don't need you. So I don't know. This movie just like hit the nail on the head. And like you said, I think several people will miss it. I don't know how you're going to miss it. And then, like I said, there's probably not much hope for you if you are missing the points of these movies. But like, it was about oppression on every level: race, class, ability status. Ability status not just based in differing abilities, but also magical abilities. And this idea of like, quote unquote, fake news, like, oh, if I tell you something, you must believe it. The wizard is this almighty powerful person who can do all these things, who actually is just a man blowing smoke, no pun intended. And when push comes to shove, they can't do anything. And yet you have to rely on the backs of Black women to try to save you every time. And I was like, it was such a nice parallel that I think will go unmissed. But you cannot always rely on Black women to save you. White women are going to have to want to save themselves at some point.
Yeah, and I'm glad you brought up the sister, because I think the sister really is another kind of archetype in this issue, which is you have the sister who has her own issues that she's dealing with, but she's got just that little bit of an edge, right? She kind of represents a sort of model minority type character where I have just enough privilege over you, who's clearly at the bottom. I am not willing to sacrifice that. I'm holding on to with every fiber of my being. I am not willing to form any kind of alliance with you. Like, the sister really never has her back at all. It's Glinda who comes forward, right, during the dance. Like, and despite how devoted Elphaba is to her sister, like that devotion does not seem to work both ways. She's ashamed and embarrassed of her for most of the movie. And I think that also is another piece of this thing where if you have any kind of status, even if it's not the highest status in this society, you're gonna hold on to that tooth and nail, and you're not going to help other people out because you're so conscious of how quickly you could be at the bottom too.
Yeah, if Elphaba wasn't there,
Yeah.
Nessa would be at the bottom.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that I think that to the actress's credit, I think that transition was really interesting to watch in the movie. And like when she's getting dropped off at the school, like they seem very, friendly, and because I think probably up until that point they've had to be kind of ride or die with each other, and Elphaba seems to be the only one who truly wants her to let her be independent, and not with any extra help unless she asks for it. And then like the moment Elphaba has like the big scene with her magic going crazy at the school, Nessa Rose is just like abandoned. It's like it switches on such a dime. So yeah, I agree, and it was just interesting to watch it play out on screen.
Well done, though. I mean, I thought it was well done, but it was, yeah, I agree that I think Nessa's transformation will be the most interesting to see in part 2, because something has to push everyone to madness, right? Like,
and I think too, like one of the funny things about all of this. So one reviewer pointed out, which I actually thought myself, and I totally agreed with too, was that nobody was pretending to be 20 in this movie. And I was like, yeah, they all looked old. That was great. Just commit to it. Commit to everyone being 30 and in college or whatever. Don't
Graduate school.
Yeah, like don't
More variety of ages.
yeah, like it's fine. It's fine. It's fine. I was like, cool. I'm glad we did that. If you had had like one young person in there, it would have looked weird and problematic.
But also, like, no one cared, right? Like, they were all like, yeah, well, this is a magical world. Who cares?
Yeah, you got to go work on the farm for 10 years and then you get to go to school. I don't know. I don't care.
Right.
But like having said that, I actually think one of the better sort of allegories in the movie, and distilled into the song Popular is that we're all still just in high school, right? And I say that about every presidential election. I was like, you think this is different than high school? It's just a popularity contest. Like no one cares about policies or any of these other things. They pick who they most want to have a beer with. And I think
Yeah.
that the movie kind of draws that parallel as like, yeah, people are doing this for the most base and teenage immature reasons.
Well, and and also with the kind of going all this like kind of base desire to be, wanted and loved and all of that. And then also, in the movie about what initially unites them against the animals, I think is like a famine or a lack of resources. And so it's like once you start taking away basic needs, it's like everyone turns on each other and thinks in a certain way. And then that kind of manifests in all these different ways as we've discussed.
Yeah, manifest as Trump elected twice.
Yeah, I love that the movie sets all of this up as like this is all just high school because it is in so many depressing ways. All right. Um yeah, this is a tough one. So, social impact score, 1 being this movie has no impact and was terrible, 2 a 10 being movies and the world as we know it is forever changed. Anybody want to be the brave first reviewer?
I can go. This might be the highest score that I've given a movie on this podcast because I might give it a 10. I think it's it's really good as we've clearly raved about. There's I think especially as Garrett said with a second Trump election presidency that has happened in the last month or so and kind of all the different comparisons. Um, I hope that, people take it to heart and um, I think it's also doing really well at the box office and a lot of people are seeing it and I think Cynthia Erivo was kind of already coming on the map, but I think this will put her solidly on the map. And I think, there may be people who, especially younger people who know Ariana Grande for this more than maybe some of her other stuff, depending on what they're exposed to. And I think it's kind of what kind of touch point, I don't know, we'll look back on, but I think we'll definitely remember this for a while.
Yeah, as you know, I'm probably the most critical on scores here on the podcast often for my social views, and I'm going to give it a solid 8. Um, I think it has a lot to say. I think it has a lot to be talked about on a social impact score. I think people really are going to go out and see this. I think it's going to become a cult classic instantly. I think it'll be talked about for a long time. I think it'll get a lot of Oscar nominations and buzz. Um, I really just, it's a really enjoyable movie, but I may even go into an 8.5 at this point. There's just so many social conversations that can be taken from this movie if you want to. And again, those not willing to take anything from this movie, that's fine. It's still a great movie to see. But you can't really walk away from this one not having some sort of social conversation about anything, even if it's about her landing the role, Cynthia landing the role as Elphaba, because she crushed it in a way that I never thought she could. And that generated a lot of controversy with people, which I loved because I was like, well, she deserves every bit that she has done. So go eat green dirt.
Yeah. So, yeah, I'm having a hard time with this. So I will say I feel vindicated because I do remember being like, I'm giving Crazy Rich Asians a 10. And we got all the way from Crazy Rich Asians to Everything Everywhere all at once, like winning a whole bunch of awards. And I'm like, again, it's not quite a direct line, but I was like, I think this is going to do a lot for Asian representation, and I firmly stand behind that 10. For this one, again, I'm sort of cognizant of the people who most need to hear the message may not learn it. I'm going to go with you, Garret, for 8. In terms of movies changing forever, God, I hope so. Like, please bring back like the big splashy movie musical. Like, yes, let this be the Renaissance. Like, I want that so badly, but I am not convinced this is going to be what turns the tide. I feel like it's trickling up. I am just not sure that this means that a whole bunch of splashy, dancey movie musicals are going to get made, but I want it to be true. So, recommendations. I know that I have recommended Singin' in the Rain before because it is the best movie musical ever created, and everyone should see it multiple times until you know every word to every song by heart. But I'm not recommending Singing in the Rain this time. I am going to go back a little further to some of the golden age of movie musicals. I am going to recommend my personal favorite, Fred and Ginger, the Gay Divorcee. So if you have not seen a Fred and Ginger movie before and watch them dance across the screen, you are absolutely missing out. It's very 40s screwball comedy, a lot of physical comedy, of which Ginger Rogers is an absolute master, and of course, great dancing. So go check out a Fred and Ginger movie, in particular, The Gay Divorcee.
I'll recommend another movie podcast that helped me gather some of my thoughts for this review. So I made references to what some of the references I made to other people and whatnot came from that podcast. It's called Guilty Pleasures. I may have recommended it on here before, but I guess I'll recommend it again. So it did help me with this review. It's with Zach Kornfeld from the Try Guys, plus 2 other people who are kind of, if you're familiar with like the kind of 2014, 15, 16 era of like BuzzFeed, you probably will recognize these other people, Kelsey and Garret. They do like a movie podcast. I think it originally was focused on like movies that are considered guilty pleasures, like Fast and the Furious, or other ones like that. But they do kind of a bunch of movies. But it is funny, and I like all 3 of them, so that's why I find it enjoyable.
I'm actually going to piggyback on Nicole's kind of recommendation earlier of reading the original Oz books. I've not read them all. I remember I read a whole bunch of them in middle school, but there's quite a few of them. But it is a really different telling even of the idealized kind of like version that you saw in the Wizard of Oz movie. They're a little darker. They're like kind of like almost a grim kind of take. Things are a lot kind of more intense and more not as flashy for the screen. But there's a lot of it that actually goes through a lot of like kind of like Oz's like power structure and how authoritarian power really comes into play. It was a precursor to a lot of like books about war, which I think was interesting. He was writing about this before kind of like war demoralized the world. So early, I think it was 1900s, right? He started them. So before he'd really seen like World War I or World War II, and was still writing about kind of like a cautionary tale about authoritarian type governments. So yeah, I'm going to do that for my recommendation.
Great. Well, we hope you enjoyed this episode. If you did, hit us up at moviesmatterpod@gmail.com. Leave a comment on the YouTube page. Check us out on Facebook. We're all the places. And remember, movies matter.
And so
do you.
We'll see you next time.